Javdekarji, Mrs. Nirmala Sitharamanji, Shri Dattatreyaji from the Union Council of Ministers, and all the other respected distinguished guests on the dais, and of course the recipient of today's award, Shri Satish Reddy ji, and all the guests seated before the dais. I must say it's a great privilege for me to be standing here this evening. But let me confess that I did not really believe that I would be called onto the dais to deliver a speech. I thought I would be one of those very content audience who will be sitting in front of the dais listening to the speakers on the dais. But nevertheless, it is an honor and a privilege to me to be sharing the dais with all the distinguished guests and to be here to share my thoughts with all of you here this evening. I must say that it is a great time that we are actually honoring Satish Reddy ji as a scientist of our country. Even as we are felicitating him, peripherally to most of us, it may look as if we are actually felicitating a scientist of the country. But to me, it actually looks like we are felicitating the entire scientist fraternity in our country who are doing yeoman service in ensuring that our country reaches greater heights. But for us, even as we view the felicitation program that would commence within a few minutes, it would look like, yes, we are actually felicitating Satish Reddy ji, who has done great service in the avionics sector and who has been spending his, or rather imparting his valuable advice to the government of India when it comes to, as a scientific advisor. But if we are to look deeper into the program this evening, I'm sure it would draw or attract our attention to various other fields, to probably the field of education itself, to the sector of research itself, to the field, to the area of research itself. We know that we do have a large population in our country, and education needs to be accessible to all of them. We speak of the governments spending about 6% of the GDP for education, but we know that just for the governments or it to be public spending would not enable us to reach the 6% that we intend to reach. We need to do out-of-the-box thinking to make sure that we have this huge pool of talent or intelligence that we have in our country in the form of our children to actually access schools. It took us almost a few decades before we brought in the right to education to ensure that every child actually went to school. But I'm sure we are all aware of the fact of the disparities that actually exist in our country. On the one hand, the entire world is today looking towards India as a great economic power in the making, or like speakers before me had said, already treading the path of being a great economic power. But the flip side of the coin is the disparities that we need to focus upon. We know that there is the rural and the urban divide when it comes to education. We know that education is accessible in some areas of our country and very difficult to access in some areas. I would not say that it is not accessible, but rather very difficult to access in some areas of our country. We know that we have a large number of children who are actually coming to our elementary schools, but whether they are sustainably moving up the ladder to the middle and the higher education, to reach the echelons of education is a matter that we need to focus greater upon. Even as we talk of education, and we look at Sri Satish Reddy ji who's sitting on the dais, the next question that would come to our mind is, how much of it that we are spending on research in our country itself? I think that's a very important and a huge question that we need to answer. And as an example, if I am to quote an example to all of you, we know that the world looks up to India as a great IT power, information technology power. But unfortunately, our own country, which is considered a great IT power, has to look towards other countries for solutions and bring them back into our country. That is the kind of research sadly, that is happening in our country. We know that we need to spend at least 4% of our GDP on research, but we know that it is anywhere between 1 to 2% that we are spending on research. And that 1 to 2% is also public spending, and this means that we need to get a lot more of the private sector into actually entering research. And if we do, if we are successful in ensuring that we reach the 4% of GDP to be spent on research, I'm sure there can be no power in the world that can prevent India from becoming the greatest economic power in the world. We know our rural India, even as we talk of the developed India, we know there is a poor cousin, the Bharat, on the other side, which is actually crying for solutions. And it is here that research actually needs to step in to ensure that it can bring the Bharat on par with India, and that is what can make our country, India, one of the best nations in the world. And before I end, I would only like to close with a quote from Kautilya, which is very close to my heart, and I'm sure I have recited this in many of the programs that I have been to, which says, Svagrihe pujyate jeshta, Swagrame pujyate prabhu, Swadese pujyate raja, Vidwan sarvatra pujyate. Which means the eldest in the family is respected. And in a village, the village head is respected. In a kingdom, the kingdom is revered. But an educated person, he can go anywhere, be anywhere, he would be loved, respected, and welcome. And it is that I think all of us would have to actually try and ensure that our children become. Already, we have been making a mark in the world, but we must ensure that that mark, that stamp that we have been putting on the world is going to be a permanent one. Therefore, even as we felicitate Sri Satish Reddy ji, I think these are the few areas that we, or rather our country, needs greater and more focus. And with these words, let me thank the organizers of this program for having given me the occasion to stand before you and to share my thoughts and my concerns with all of you. Thank you.